video is made in partnership with Magnitude Finance. If you're thinking of buying an EV or any car from an F40 through to a Mark 1 Golf GTI, use their online calculator or get in touch with their team for a finance quote. Well, hello one and all, welcome to Seen Through Glass. Welcome to the Abarth 500E. Many of you will know I've been very excited about this car ever since it was unveiled. Because firstly, I'm an Abarth fan. But secondly, this is an EV that really appeals to me. It kind of makes sense to me. It's a small city car that I can use around town for short journeys. It's relatively quick and easy to recharge. And on looks alone, I think it's packed full of character. Now, I have actually already driven the Abarth 500E, but I wanted to wait before I made a video, spend some proper time with it, kind of live with it, to see if this could genuinely be my first EV. Now, how do you pack character into an EV? Like I just said, I think Abarth have smashed it when it comes to the look of this car, but, well, you need to do so much more to give a vehicle personality, soul. Let's face it, by default, most EVs are lacking in soul. They tend to be a bit dull. Abarth realised, for example, with their combustion engine vehicles, a big part of what gave those cars personality and character was the way they sounded. And having previously owned a 695 Piposto and a 595 Competizione, I'd have to agree with them. The noises that came out of the exhaust of those two cars was a big reason as to why I smiled every time I got behind the wheel of those two cars. So yeah, Abarth worked out if they were going to make an electric vehicle, if it was silent like most other EVs, probably wasn't going to appeal to their customer base. So they came up with this now internet famous sound generator, which, yeah, it's a speaker underneath the car that emits a kind of fake engine exhaust noise. You've probably seen it on TikTok or Instagram. We're going to come back to it in a moment, because it's not the only sound that Abarth introduced to this car to give it a little, you know, hey, I'm an Abarth. They came up with a jingle. Now, it's not unheard of for cars to make a noise when they start up. I think the RS Audis do that boom, 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 and other cars make other sounds. But yeah, Abarth went with a rock and roll guitar jingle for this car. Now, when I first heard about this at the UK launch, I was like, oh, what? Then I experienced it for the first time and I was like, ugh. Now, it's a tiny thing, it plays for like 2 seconds, it's not that important, but there's a reason why I'm making such a big fuss about it. Firstly, let me demonstrate it so you know what I'm talking about. Ignition on. And then power on, and are you ready? Yeah! I think it does it again when you turn the car off. Yeah, whoa. I mean, I'm a big fan of rock and roll. I used to play the guitar. It just feels a little bit try-hard, a little bit fake. And that's the thing, when you're trying to engineer in character to something which is fundamentally not that characterful, an EV, some things are going to work and some things are going to feel a little bit, yeah, extreme. And we're going to get into the sound generator now, because I know from reading comments online, well, some of you think it feels really fake and unnecessary. Some of you quite like the idea. I think I'm somewhere in between the two. I cannot begin to explain to you how loud this sound generator is, especially from the outside. I definitely think it's louder than any of the combustion engine Abarths I owned. Heck, I think it might be louder than my old Ferrari 360. Like, it's noisy. In that Muse just then, I was almost embarrassed to turn it on. And that's not usually the case with electric vehicles. Now, let's talk about the positives for a moment. I do think it adds to the dynamic driving experience. When I first had a go in one of these cars, it was out in the countryside. I actually spent a day driving up to Caffeine and Machine, where I could really kind of get into, well, yeah, the driving dynamics, the power, etc. more and more. And I liked the fact that there was some kind of soundtrack accompanying the speed. The interesting thing is, in and around town, you don't get so much of, well, the tonal changes. Okay, when you're in a combustion engine vehicle, within reason, every 500 RPM, the sound changes slightly because you're working your way through the gears. But obviously, in an electric vehicle, there's just one gear, drive. And so bit of wheel spin there, but if I stamp on it, that was 0 to 23 miles an hour, and not a lot changes. It's this kind of constant, so you don't get the benefits of the soundtrack around town. It's just a bit of a drone. So I think it depends where you're going to have this car, where you're going to use it. If it is going to be a toy for the weekend, which I think is unlikely with it being an EV, then I think you're really going to appreciate the soundtrack. But if it's just for daily commutes or in-town driving, you're just not going to get the benefit of it. For example, let me find somewhere to pull over. Pull in here. If I shove it into park, put the window down. I mean, listen. I mean, okay, that is a bit silly, but it genuinely revs, and it changes in sound and tone, and you don't get that here. The other, I've gone straight to the negatives, haven't I? I said let's not go straight to the negatives, but I'm doing that. On the motorway, it's so drony. It's like insanely drony at 50 odd miles an hour. At 70, it's almost unbearable. So, thankfully, Abarth do allow you to turn it off. And again, I actually have to stop to do that. Pull in here. Into, do I need to, no, I don't need to be into park. I can set my foot on the brake. It's within the cluster behind the steering wheel. Display, electric features, external sound. There we go. And look, now I can pull away like I'm in a normal EV. And here's the conundrum, right? As an Abarth fan, as a car enthusiast, you know, the fact that electric cars are relatively silent is a big reason why I struggle to connect with them. But the appeal of this car is that I could use it for just little missions around town. Then I kind of want to secretly sneak around. I like the silence. I don't need the brrr. I want that when I'm on a back road going fast, but just here, yeah, I would leave it off. So I'm going to give the sound generator like a 6 or 7 out of 10. It's like a good effort. I appreciate the thought, and I actually quite like it. I just wouldn't use it very often. I would turn it on just to kind of show off, like I did when I was arriving at the podcast studio the other day, and a man from one of the other units came out and said, "Oh my God, I thought that was an Aston Martin." The smile on my face. I even revved it for him. I revved an electric vehicle. He was like, "That sounds good." I was like, "Watch this, good sir." That's fun. But actually to live with, yeah, not that necessary. Oh, I've been boxed in by a truck. London traffic. It's not what it used to be, people. It's pretty horrific driving around here. I just realised, along with being able to turn off the sound generator, you can actually also deactivate the rock and roll guitar jingle in that little sub-menu. But let's move away from sound and go back to my original point, talk about the way this car looks, because for me, Abarth have smashed it out the park when it comes to the design of this little car. I actually think the Fiat 500E is a pretty good looking car, but Abarth have done that age-old formula of taking a pretty thing and just making it mean and aggressive and desirable. That new front bumper, the fact that it sits low on these big old wheels, it's got big scorpion badges everywhere, it's like a little Italian pit bull, it's very in your face. I cannot tell you how much appreciation this car has got as I've driven it around central London. Everywhere I've gone, people have come up to me being like, "Oh, I've ordered one, how is it?" Or "I'm thinking of getting one," or "What is this?" That's because I think if you live in a city centre, you've been considering making the move to an EV, you don't have that many choices. A lot of electric vehicles are big. Take that Hyundai Ioniq 5, everyone thinks it's a hatchback like this, and then you see it and you realise it's basically an SUV. So aside from maybe the Honda E or the Mini Electric or that Fiat 500E, there's not a lot out there, not a lot that has, well, the impact that this thing does, especially in this colour. But to be fair, pretty much all the colours that Abarth offer are in your face. This is acid green, there's a nice blue that I've seen, and they're just shouting. And that's where I think they've really successfully engineered in character, because you see this thing and you go, "What is that?" Now the car gains most of its interior from the Fiat 500E, but that's really no bad thing because, well, it's a nice place to spend time this, and if you spend a lot of time around Fiat 500s or Abarth 500s, you know, their interiors have often been a letdown. But this is pretty nice, and then with the added Abarth trim, which includes a lot of Alcantara, it's kind of alternate stitching, the big Abarth badges and stuff, feels, dare I say it, kind of premium. It got loads of cubby holes for things. I like this additional bottle holder which just pops out from down here. There's endless USBs and charging points. This is a wireless phone charger here. It's got a nice little sketch out of the Turin skyline. And then we have tech, which again is something that you're not really used to as an Abarth or I guess Fiat 500 owner. So if I kickstart the ignition, there we go, lovely big old Abarth badge. Oh yeah, JBL speakers. This is the Scorpionissima. Here's the top level spec. I forget all the names of the specs. But there you go, as you can see, wireless Apple CarPlay immediately integrated, nice and easy. Air conditioning buttons, look at that, buttons. Yeah, it's lovely, and this I'm a massive fan of. This kind of pano roof lets so much light into the cabin, and then if you need to shade yourself, you can, but as a car to nip around town in or to spend some time in, it's lovely. These seats are great. I can't say enough good things about the interior. No longer does it feel like you're in a sort of cheap small bus. Yes, it's still a big steering wheel, but I'm a fan of that. So let's move on and talk about what it's like to drive one of these Abarth 500Es. I have to say, in and around town, it's been lovely. It's relatively smooth, it's quick off the line, which means getting away from traffic lights or pulling out of junctions is very easy to do. The ride is a little firm, but like sporty firm, like nice firm. It's easy to maneuver, it's relatively easy to see out of, we might come back to that. There are 3 driving modes, Turismo, Scorpion Street and Scorpion Track. And they alter how much power is available, but also how much wow, that's a hard word. Regen braking is taking place. Maximum regen in Turismo, minimum regen in Scorpion Track. I found myself driving around most of the time in Turismo. That's because the range has not been fantastic. Now, I was never expecting to do hundreds and hundreds of miles in an Abarth 500E. It's a small car with a small battery, but yeah, it's been pretty bad. I don't know what the claimed range is, probably 180 miles, but I've basically been doing like 1% for 1 mile. So I got 59% battery charge at the moment. It's giving me an expected range of 59 miles. So, you know, that's not fantastic if you're going to use this car out of the city. It's fine for me because I only really would plan on doing short trips in this thing. I can charge it overnight. If I find a fast charger like I did this morning, it genuinely gave me like 40% extra charge in like 12 minutes, and that was fine. I was off and ready to go. But yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, the first time I drove one of these cars was out in the countryside. I pushed on it a lot more. And that was my chance to really see if it still feels like an Abarth somehow, even though it's an electric vehicle. I gotta be honest, I'm not sure it does. Also, important for me to say, I haven't driven a Fiat 500E, so I can't tell you how much more of a driver's car this thing is. But in my mind, Abarths are always kind of urgent, always a bit frantic and like hooligans. Well, this, I felt like I really needed to really kind of rev it out, is the wrong expression, but really pick it up by the scruff of its neck to get the kind of enjoyment out of faster driving, where I always could enjoy my combustion engine Abarth at any speed. It's different in town. In town, it's kind of spinning up its front wheels on these greasy roads, and it's kind of urgent, like it's got an edge to it in town at slower speeds. It's just when you get out onto the wider stuff, but maybe that's not where you should be using it. Maybe think of it as a small city car with a small range and use it in an urban environment, and then it's kind of great. So then, where's my head at? Could this one day be my first EV? A huge part of me wants to say yes. There are so many things that I adore about this little car, but there are 2 fairly major sticking points which I think are holding me back. Firstly, we've got to talk about money. The starting price for this top level spec Abarth 500E is like £38,000. Now, I'm not against paying nearly 40 grand for an Abarth. I did that with the Biposto Record Edition. But because electric vehicles continue to suffer pretty hectic depreciation, it makes this little car quite expensive to finance, which is what I'd be looking to do. I went on the Magnitude finance calculator, put in a 10% deposit over 4 years. It was coming out at like 500 quid a month. Now, that's a lot in general, but it's especially a lot when you look at what else you could get from the EV market for less. Now, the examples I'm about to read off are used examples, and there's always a debate of new versus used. But I think it's more relevant in the world of EVs because of the depreciation they're suffering and the variety that's out there on the market. Now, all of these examples have got like 20 to 30,000 miles, and again, I got all of these numbers from the Magnitude Finance calculator by doing a 10% deposit and payments over 4 years. But kicking things off, Hyundai Ioniq 5 for £400 per month. That's 100 quid less than the Abarth, and okay, it's a bigger car, but I'm getting bigger range. It's arguably probably a better car. It's hard to ignore something like that. Audi Q4 e-tron, £480 per month. Okay, only a small saving theoretically, but it's an Audi. It's a Q4, it's a big old car. Mercedes EQA, similar money, £500 per month. Tesla Model 3 Performance for £450 per month. Okay, you're going to be looking at one with quite a lot of miles, but it's a Tesla, and much as I bash them, well, they're hard to ignore in the world of EVs. Now, you might be thinking, well, hold on a sec, Sam, just wait a year for these things to depreciate and pick one up when it's 25 grand or so. Why don't I just look at Fiat 500E? Surely that would make more sense. But Fiat 500E, top level spec, the La Prima, well, it's 350, 400 quid per month to finance. So my worry is these little 500, electric 500s, they're just expensive. The value isn't necessarily in them when you look at what else is out there in the electric vehicle market. So I'm not saying no, never say never. I do love this little thing, and if I can make the man maths work, I would probably try and get one. But if I'm really considering getting my first EV, I feel like I need to experience a lot of other vehicles. Some of the ones I just mentioned, but also like right at the top end of the market to see what the latest offerings are. Also some really hectic used examples that maybe have lots of miles but represent real huge bargains. There are some Porsche Taycans out there, circa 50 grand. So yeah, watch this space. I think more EV content to come, and maybe more Abarth 500E electric to come, but I can't justify the money just yet. Huge thanks to Abarth for loaning me these once again, and thanks to Magnitude Finance for helping me put this video together. I hope you found it insightful. Give it a thumbs up if you have, and stay subscribed for plenty more videos to come.